In the Kingdom of Dahomey, in what is now the Benin Republic, there was a military unit that terrified neighboring kingdoms and European colonizers alike. It wasn't the largest army, it wasn't the most heavily armed, but it was the most feared, because it was led entirely by women. And these women warriors were called the Amazons. They were skilled fighters, they were fierce, they were disciplined, and they represented something that terrified the world: female military power. This is the story of Dahomey's Amazons, and it's a story about what happens when women control the most powerful military force in a kingdom. I'm Kay, and this is Labari Studio, where we tell you about the female warriors of Africa whose military power shaped empires. The Amazons of Dahomey weren't mythical, they were real. They were a documented historical military force, and they changed what the world understood about female combat power. Let's talk about who they were. The Amazons didn't start as an all-female military unit. In the early 1600s, Dahomey's king used women as palace guards. But over time, these women guards were given more responsibility, more training, more combat roles. By the 18th century, the women guards had become a fully fledged military unit, an elite force, the most powerful warriors in Dahomey. At their height, there were estimated to be between 1,000 and 6,000 Amazons. Exact numbers are unclear, but they were substantial. They made up a significant portion of Dahomey's military, and they were considered the kingdom's elite force. The Amazons were selected from the general population. They were trained from youth in combat and military strategy. They were unmarried, many voluntarily, some by royal decree. They had no children. Their loyalty was entirely to the kingdom and to the Amazons as a unit. They were organized in companies. They had officers. They had ranks. They had a command structure. They were skilled in multiple weapons: machetes, rifles, spears. They were trained in ambush tactics, in siege warfare, in open battle. They were fierce, they were loyal, and they were deadly. The Amazons had a reputation that spread throughout West Africa. Neighboring kingdoms feared them. They knew that if Dahomey sent the Amazons, they were facing elite fighters who showed no mercy. European traders and later colonizers were shocked by the existence of an all-female warrior unit. This challenged their entire understanding of gender and warfare. European accounts describe the Amazons with a mix of fascination and horror. They called them fierce, brutal, undefeatable. The Amazons weren't the largest military force in Dahomey, but they were the most feared. And sometimes the most feared are more powerful than the largest. The Amazons served multiple roles in Dahomey's military. Sometimes they were shock troops, used to break enemy formations with their ferocity. Sometimes they were elite guards, protecting the king. Sometimes they were the primary fighting force in campaigns. And increasingly, they served as commanders and leaders of other military units. By the 19th century, when Dahomey was fighting against French colonization, the Amazons were leading the resistance. In the late 1800s, France was expanding its colonial presence in West Africa. They wanted Dahomey. They wanted its resources. They wanted to bring it under French control. But Dahomey's king had the Amazons, and the Amazons were not willing to let their kingdom fall without a fight. When the French invaded, the Amazons fought back ferociously. Contemporary accounts describe battles where the Amazons charged French soldiers, where they fought with fury and skill. The French were shocked. They had expected to easily defeat primitive African warriors. They found instead elite fighters who matched and sometimes exceeded their own soldiers. The Amazons fought against French colonization for years. They had smaller numbers, they had less advanced technology, but they had skill, training, and absolute determination. Some of the most famous battles of this period feature the Amazons prominently. Their ferocity became legendary, but eventually the numbers and superior technology proved decisive. Dahomey fell to French colonization. The Amazons were disbanded. Their warrior traditions were suppressed. Their stories were erased. When Dahomey became a French colony, The colonizers wanted to erase the Amazons from history. They portrayed the Amazons as fearsome but primitive. They said they were barbaric. They said they were not real soldiers, just tribal warriors. And gradually, the Amazons disappeared from European historical records. They became a footnote, a curious historical oddity. The world forgot that Africa had an elite, all-female military force, forgot that women had commanded armies, forgot the Amazons. The erasure of the Amazons mattered because it erased a model, a historical proof that women could be the elite warriors of a kingdom. It said, women can't be warriors. Women can't lead military forces. Women can't be the most feared fighters in a kingdom. But the Amazons proved otherwise, and that proof had to be erased. Despite the erasure, the evidence of the Amazons remains. Contemporary accounts by European observers document the Amazons in detail. They may be biased, but they confirm the existence and power of the Amazons. Oral histories in Dahomey and the region preserve the memory of the Amazons. The people never forgot. Modern historians have recovered and studied the Amazons. They show a well-organized, well-trained, elite military force. What did the Amazons represent? They represented the idea that women could be warriors. Not just warriors, but the elite warriors. The most feared warriors. The ones that other armies feared to face. They represented a kingdom's choice to place its military power in women's hands, and to have that work brilliantly. They represented resistance to colonialism led by women, female military leaders saying no to European domination. And they represented a model that the world tried very hard to erase because it was too powerful, too successful, too true. The Amazons matter because they prove that female warriors are ancient, that women have led military forces, that women have been the elite fighters in their societies. The Amazons show that female military power is not a modern invention. It's a return to something ancient. And knowing about the Amazons changes what's possible. It changes what women believe about themselves. It changes what the world believes about female power. Thank you for watching. We post 3 episodes every week, stories about African warriors, leaders, and power. Join us on Saturday, where we discuss the Swahili women and their trade empire. Like and subscribe. See you in the next episode.